What's up everyone? Aaron here for Bikeman Performance, and on this Installation Nation we're going to be doing an install of a bolt-on performance kit stage 1 for this E-TEC 850 NA Ski-Doo. Alright, let's go talk to Farmer.
What's happening? Today we will be installing a Stage 1 Bikeman Performance Kit on this Summit 850. Alright, in the Bikeman bolt-on performance kit, you will be getting Y-pipe, pipe, and the pipe comes with 2 different stingers depending on your elevation. Choice of muffler. This chubby little guy is going with the munchy muffler. He loves to snack on the trail. Clutch setup, smooth shift washers, the steep and deep helix. You'll also be getting a new gear. Goes from a 21 tooth of stock in this model, and it's going to be going down to a 19. And this kit will be coming with the P-drive adjustable weights and a purple primary spring. Alright, when installing this kit, we've actually already gone ahead and removed most of the parts so we can get right into it and show you what we're going to be doing. First, we're going to remove the Y-pipe, get that out of there as well. Next up, since we're going to be doing a gear change, we're going to go right to the gear case, get the oil drained out. We'll be removing the belt. Jack shaft and secondary is all one unit on this, so this comes out as an assembly. Primary clutch coming out as well, so it's a little bit of a process, but we'll talk you guys all through it, and it's not too bad. Alright, to pull the Y-pipe, you're going to need a 6mm Allen. Helps if you have a ball end, 6-inch extension, then you can get all the bolts. I've already removed 6 of the 8 and down to the last 2. Try not to drop them. It's real fun fishing them out of there if you do. There's the Y-pipe removal. Alright, to access the primary bolt, you need to remove this little cotter pin down here. This little guy helps have any type of a pliers or a 90-degree needle nose. After you remove that little cotter pin, push out on the bottom and slide it downward. It should pop right out. It's the access panel for the primary clutch bolt. Alright, after removing this, you will need your stock tool to remove the belt from your secondary. Take this little guy, put it in the proper hole, spin it in, it pushes the cam in, or helix, whatever you'd like to call it. Alright, then after you get it in far enough, you'll be able to walk the belt off. Once that's out, take the tool back out. Do not lose your secondary tool. These are very important. But if you do, I believe we sell these as well. Check them out on our website. And walk the belt out. A couple little molding nubs down there you'll have to work the belt past down in the bottom of the tunnel. And then there's your belt. Set that aside. Next, we'll be pulling the primary clutch. Alright, for removing the primary, you're going to need a 12.21mm socket. You can use the breaker bar. We've got an impact. We'll go ahead and remove the bolt now. There's a second set of threads on these clutches that the puller uses. You also had to thread the bolt back out of them. Make sure you get it started in there, and then you can spin it out with whatever you're using, just so you don't wreck the threads on your bolt. Alright, to pull off the primary clutch, I've got both of our pullers here. One's for the P-drive and one is for the TRA clutch. Make sure you get the P-drive one. If you put this in, nothing will happen. It'll just go beyond the internal threads in the clutch and just sit and spin. You'll be going, why ain't this coming off? So you need the P-drive clutch puller. We sell these at Bikeman as well. Check it out on the website. Alright, when you get your puller, you're going to want to lightly lubricate the threads. Don't put dry puller into the clutch. Just a little bit of lube, you don't need much. Alright, to remove the clutch, insert your puller. Always start your pullers by hand. You don't want to damage the threads. Takes a 3/4 inch socket. Run it in. All right, and then rattle her off. or not. We're going to add a little lube to the tip as well. Wow, another tight one. All right, some clutches don't like to come off, so we got a little trick. Take a grease gun, cram it in here, put about 5 shots of grease in here. You don't need much. All you're basically doing is displacing the area inside the clutch. All right, 3/4 inch socket, rattle it off, and it popped off on the other part of the video. Some of these clutches get stuck. You have to grease them to get them off. It's messy, but it'll get them off for you. All right, now that you got this popped, it's easier to pull the secondary and get this out of the way before trying to remove this. Just makes a little bit more room in here. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. All right, we're gonna start removing the outer chain case cover, or I guess the chain case cover. All right, to remove this plug-in, pull up the safety lock, and then disengage this. This is for the electric start. Number 2, this is for the speedometer. You need to disconnect this as well. There's a little tab on the back side. Squeeze it, remove that. All right, we're gonna remove the vent plug. This also gives you access to the bolt that holds your gear on and the jack shaft in. Get that popped out. All right, for the majority of the bolts in the chain case cover, it's a T30. We'll show you there's one oddball one on here. We'll show you that when we get to it. So I'll go ahead and start removing these. Now this, kind of rotate these out of here. There we go. All right, now that we've got everything open, this is the upper bolt that holds your sprocket on to your jack shaft, upper jack shaft. We'll be removing that. Before we do that step though, we need to release tension on the chain so everything comes off easier. All right, now there's a cotter pin that keeps the tensioner bolt from spinning. Pull that out. And then you will take a T25, back that up. You don't have to go real far. You can see we've got quite a bit of play, and that should be good enough. All right, now that we got the tension released, go ahead and remove this. This is the 15 mil head bolt. All right, after the bolt's out, go ahead and remove this. And then just kind of lay the chain down in there, however it wants to go. There's also a spacer in here you don't want to lose. That spaces the sprocket out far enough so your chain doesn't rub on the inner chain case. Now we'll head to the other side of the machine and remove the retainer on the jack shaft bearing. All right, on the secondary side of the machine on the jack shaft, there's a bolt down here, or a nut you need to remove off the retainer for the bearing. 13 millimeter. Helps if you've got a ratchet wrench. If not, you know, just do what you can. All right, there's the retainer and nut. Put that back on so you don't lose it, and set that aside. All right, to make this go a little easier, just good to have a rubber hammer. The bearings kind of stick in the housing here, so hang on to your clutch so it don't go flying. And then lightly hit the tip of the jack shaft on this side. Sometimes you gotta hit a little harder than light. And there is how you remove the secondary clutch. All right, now that we've got the secondary out of the way, the primary will come out much easier. So we'll go ahead and pop this out. And we're gonna, remember we pumped grease in there to get it off, so we're gonna get that cleaned out as well. We'll take it to the bench. All right, on these Skidoo clutches, these are balanced, and you can see there's timing marks on them right here and here. These ones aren't exactly lined up, so we'll show you how to line them back up. But first off, we're gonna show you how to separate the two halves of the clutch, and we'll get into it right now. So we're gonna take the clutch puller you used earlier, thread this back down. You want to get it in there quite a ways because you don't want to wreck the threads internally on this clutch. So thread it in at least an inch. Put your safety glasses on. Alright, next, make sure you're above a bench, preferably padded, and go ahead and strike this. And there it is. Make it a little quicker. That's how you separate the clutches. Clutch halves, I should say. Now just do the best you can to get all the grease out of there. Be sure to use some carburetor cleaner or brake clean. You know, any type of a cleaner as long as you have no grease inside your clutch. Alright, next we need to get to the spring retainer. That is under this cover. Go ahead and remove the six Torx bolts. They are a T40. Set that aside, and this is the retainer. All right, throw it in the clutch compressor, tighten it on down. You're gonna need to remove a spring clip down here. This little guy has got to come out. Kind of tight, it's not much room in here. So you want to make sure you kind of get this centered the best you can. For this step, take a small snap ring pliers, go ahead and spread this. And I just pop up one side or the other. Get it started, and then you can work it right around. There it is. All right. Don't lose this little guy. Set him aside. And remove your spring and retainer. All right, after you get your clutch sheaves apart from each other, it's a good idea to take a piece of Scotch-Brite. I already went around and did this one. Just go ahead and clean it up. You're going to get glazing from the belt on here. And just clean that surface off. And then when you're done, I like to take brake clean. Don't want to use carburetor cleaner on there because it'll leave a film. And then take a clean rag, go ahead and wipe that off. That's the inner sheave. So that one's clean and done. Now, for this one, this pops right off. You'll see a lot of dust and stuff in these. That's common. You see dusty parts and dirty parts. Blow them out with compressed air. Just try to keep your clutches clean. We'll set that aside for now. We'll flip this over. There you can see the belt glazing. And we'll go ahead and clean this one up so you can see what actually happens. Alright, we'll hit that with the brake clean. Wipe it down. There we are. Alright, next up we're going to remove the stock weights. These are held in by a T25. These are a tapered pin, so you need to loosen these just a little bit. You don't want to go out too far. I'll show you why in a second. Next step is you actually have to tap on these with a hammer. And that pops the pin out. Try to take care not to hit the sheave too bad. Go ahead and remove the screw a little further. Just want to be sure that you don't have it all the way out on the tip or you will mash the threads on the end of this bolt or the end of this screw. There, better angle so you can see it. I leave them just a light bit in now because they're broke loose. Go ahead and tap it. You can see that drives that pin out the other side. Now that it's floating, we can go ahead and remove it. And that is how you remove the stock weight on the P-drive clutch. clutch. We'll go ahead and repeat the process for the other two. Alright, you'll need to remove your stock clicker, the T25. We've already gone ahead and broke these loose. Sometimes you need to heat these. We actually just had to in the off camera. Just take care not to heat it up too much. The internal part is plastic. So this is how you disassemble the clicker. We'll go ahead and do that on the next two. Alright, in this clutch setup it calls for the 30 mil, which are the center ones. Be using those. Clicker position number 4. We've gone ahead and already put these in the outer halves of the clicker retainer. So we'll go ahead and start assembly. Grab your weight, clicker setup, slide it in. Kind of an inner and outer. You can see what side the bolt was grabbing on, so I like to put them back in the same way they came out. Go ahead and put these on. Like to use a drip of blue Loctite on these. Again, I put a little too much in. We'll take the other two bolts, pre-Loctite them. Run them in finger tight for now. Again, be sure you're on setting number 4. There's a notch that indicates that, and then there's numbers on the clicker. Slightly tighten, and then repeat the steps for the remaining weights. For the new bolts that you're using, these are a 5 mil Allen, and these are torqued to 16 foot-pounds. Alright, to make it easier to torque these, there's not really a good way to hang on to them. I'm going to kind of cheat. I just have a pin I'm going to put through here to hold it. Now I'll have enough leverage to torque this. And that is 16 foot-pounds. Then we'll go ahead and torque the remaining two. Stick it in there, just shove a pin through it, whatever you've got laying around. Alright, now for the weight setup, the magnet setup on these. Now on this setup it calls for 3 magnets per hole. We'll go ahead and slide it in there till you get to the 3rd and break it right off. Same for the next hole. Then be sure they've seated all the way down. You can tell by the little window on the back side. And that's how you install the weights. And now we're going to reinstall the weights onto the primary clutch. So again, I like to put them in the way they came out. So put the Loctite side in. Work it through there. We've already got Loctite on the bolts. Go ahead and run them in. Sometimes they'll spin on you a little bit. You can either tap them with a hammer or just hold them with your fingers. Don't take much. Check it for smooth operation, and then you'll feel a definite bottom out on that. Get her good and snug. We'll move on to the next one. Again, this is a T25, which you've already had out earlier. Alright, and that's how you install the weights back into the lower sheave, or the outer sheave of the primary clutch. Alright, now when you reassemble the roller housing on this, you want to line up the arrow and the little circle mark here. That shows you that they're assembled correctly. They're indexed. Now we'll go ahead. You have to lift the weights up. Alright, and these rollers go in a specific spot too. There should be a little gap in between. This will hook on the inside or the outside of the inner wheel. And again, you want to make sure your weight tip is up. And then work it on down, and there it is assembled. Timed and in place. Next we'll be installing the new purple primary spring. So we'll go back onto the clutch compression tool. Set our spring in here. Put the spring retainer on, and then retainer clip. And go ahead and put your clutch compression tool back on it and tighten it down. Just be sure you don't pinch anything. Get that down so you fully expose the retaining ring on the top for the retaining ring to go back into. And these you should be able to work on by hand. Be sure it's seated all the way in its position. Then go ahead and release the retainer cap. Double check, make sure it's seated well. You don't want that thing flying apart on you. And that is it for that part. All right, now the next step is to reinstall the outer cap that we'd removed. Line that up on there. Go ahead and put a little blue Loctite on your bolts. And reassemble. It's always good, again, to hand start everything to be sure you're not cross-threading it. I'm going to rattle them in with a 3/8 gun. And then we'll go ahead and check torque on these. They should be torqued to at least 16 foot-pounds. And that's how you assemble the outer sheave of the primary. All right, now that we've got the components installed into the primary, we're going to go ahead and reinstall it onto the sled. All right, just set that in there. We'll show you the alignment on it here after we get it most of the way installed. Okay, now the inner sheave is keyed to the motor. It will only go on one way. There's that. Now here's the inner timing mark. And then there's the outer. You want to line them up the best that you can. Now we'll go ahead and reinstall the bolt. And we have to thread this in part way to go through the external threads on the outer half of the clutch. And then it's into the crankshaft now. We're going to go ahead and rattle this on. Again, be sure your timing marks are lined up, or your clutch alignment marks are lined up. All right, we didn't tighten it fully with the impact because now we're going to make sure that it's tightened correctly to the manufacturer's specifications. All right, if you don't know what your torque spec is, it's right on your outer clutch cover. 85 to 92 foot-pounds. All right, we took a strap, plain old strap, hook it behind the tower, wrap it around, shove it through the footrest hole here. Then just wrap it up. You have to kind of crisscross it so it tangles a bit. And go ahead and spin your clutch around. Get it tight. Make sure you're kind of flat on the tower so it don't suck down in between. And torque it. All right, coming up with new ways to torque secondary clutches. There it is. All right, for this part of the setup, I'm going to show you how to remove the cam or the helix or the ramp, whatever you'd like to call it. Go ahead and loosen up this bolt. We've already got it part way loose. Heck, we might as well just take it out. Why not? Take it out, don't lose your bolt. Screwdriver in there. Again, you want to thread that. There's threads in there, so try not to mash them. Set that aside, and we'll show you the next step. Kind of difficult for some people to get this part done. If you need to, bring it on into Bikeman. This is what we've rigged up to do this. All right, get them level. You're going to want to make sure your bolts are all accessible, and then try to tighten them down in even turns. And you just need to put a little bit of pressure on it. All right, next, take a T40 and we're going to be removing the 4 bolts. Set them aside and go ahead and release the pressure. And that's how the helix or ramp comes off the secondary. All right, in this kit, you had the steep and deep helix and the 3 smooth shift washers. Those set down inside of the helix. Just like that, all 3 of them. This kit uses the stock spring Set it back up. Then we go back to the press. All right, one of my little tricks I like to do, this is an 8mm bolt by a 125. It's about 120 millimeters long. I use this to help line up the helix. You see they just drop through if you look down on the bottom side here. So you can see the bolt drop through. I like to use this as a guide. Get it lightly started in there. And do 2 of them, opposite of each other. And that will ensure that you're running the helix up into the proper spot. And go ahead and compress. All right, and I don't run it tight down, so it's got a little bit of give. Go ahead and take these back out. Little blue Loctite. Go ahead and reinstall into the original position. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and double check these with the torque wrench. Again, 16, 18 foot-pounds. And that's that. There's the steep and deep helix installed. Now we'll go ahead and reassemble the other parts. This is a wear washer for the tensioner. So again, take and spread this. Work it over that first part. And then left-hand thread. Go ahead and spin it on. Then we'll talk about the adjustment of this after we get it installed into the snowmobile. You can go ahead and start the bolt back in the hole. Washer stays on the head side. And nut goes in the little cutout area. And we'll leave that loose for adjustment purposes after it's in the sled. Alright, so we're back at the sled with the jack shaft assembly, and we're going to go ahead and reinstall. Now take care, on the other side of the chain case there is a seal. You don't want to jam the end of the shaft into the seal and wreck your seal. Get it started. Bump it in by hand. Then we're going to go ahead and reassemble or reinstall the retainer. Alright, now just put this back in the way it came out. Slide it in here. Put the nut on. And again, that's a 13mm. And it really helps if you have one of these gear wrenches. Alright, my gear wrench failed, so now we're going back to the old school. Probably like most everybody else is doing. Good old box end wrench. We're using the open end currently. Bear with me. Click. It's about 16 foot-pounds too. Perfect. Alright, now we're going to install the gear onto the jack shaft. So remember when we first took it apart, there's the spacer. We will be needing the spacer. Clean that off best you can. Just generally wet mop. These usually don't get too terribly dirty. That goes on first. There's generally marking on your gear. It's just good to put your marking out so if anyone else takes this apart, they can tell what you have in here. So there it's showing it's a 19 tooth. I'm going to go ahead and stretch the chain back up into position or close to position. And there's the gear installed. And now when you're installing it, make sure the chain goes on the proper side of the chain shoe. This is your chain tensioner. Take your stock bolt, clean that off. We're going to go hit it with some brake clean because this too is also going to get Loctite. Alright, now that we've got the chain positioned properly in the chain case, we're going to go ahead and take up some of the slack. Again, this with the T25 back here. Alright, now you don't want to make this thing into a guitar string. You want to be able to move it back and forth. You know, medium pressure, you should not hit the outer case. But you don't want it so tight that it's going to be eating into the plastic shoe here. And then go ahead, reinstall your cotter pin. These are keyed in here. There's a little hole in that bolt. The cotter pin drops through it, stops it from rotating. Now we're going to reinstall the bolt. I put red Loctite on here, cleaned it off with brake clean. And we're going to run that in with the 3/8 impact. This is a 15 millimeter. And then we will check torque on that. That should be between 18 to 22 foot-pounds. All right, to make this easy, you're going to want to set your parking brake. That way you're not chasing the sled around. Go ahead and click that, the recommended torque. All right, time to reinstall the outer cover of the gear case. Again, this kind of tips in here. To make sure we're behind the footrest or foot stop brace. Get all the plug-ins out of the way. There, she dropped into place. All right, we'll go around and start putting bolts in. All right, now we'll check them out with the torque wrench. Last, we'll go ahead and reconnect the electrical plug-in to be sure to re-engage the locking mechanism. Same thing with the speedo pickup. All right, this is to protect the bottle that gets pushed on there, and this goes through that. Give it a little pull. Be sure to fill up your chain case with the proper amount of chain case oil. Then go ahead and reinsert the plug. Just work that around. Helps to have a screwdriver to push the last part in. Just be sure that's in a comfortable position. All right, and don't forget to put the footrest stop bolt back in. Snug. It's about 6 to 8 foot-pounds on that as well. Now we're to the pipe part of this install. This is the Y pipe to be exact. I'm going to take your stock gaskets. If you didn't tear them, you can reuse them. Some people don't like to reuse them. It's okay if they're not torn, or if they're in, if they're in good shape, go ahead and reuse them. So we're going to start the install on this. They're directional, like putting a little puzzle together. All right, now these bolts, I'm just going to set this here. These bolts all had Loctite on them, so I'm going to go and pre-Loctite all of these. Get them ready for install. All right, to help keep the gaskets in place, I just kind of thread the bolts through the gaskets. If you're careful, they will stay put. This will ease in lining everything up. Then we'll go ahead and install it nice and gently. These are a 6 mil, and I have a ball end I use for this. Keep it a little ways away so you don't knock the bolts out. And I like to start the 2 end ones. Then go ahead and move to the center. After you get it started, you can go ahead and push the Y pipe in. Gives you a little bit more clearance. And now we will repeat the process for the bottom bolts. And you may have to wiggle the pipe around a little bit, or the Y pipe around a little bit, to get them all in and started. And again, with everything, always hand start all of your bolts. You do not want to cross thread your head, or your cylinder, I should say. That would be bad. All right, now that we've got them all hand started, we're going to go ahead and run them in with the ratchet here. And we're going to proceed and go ahead and torque these now. Now that you got the Y pipe on, go ahead and install your donut gasket. All right, after the Y pipe installation, we go to the pipe. Make sure you remove the rubber grommet from your stock pipe and install it in your new BMP pipe. All right, so you're gonna wanna work this down here. All right, you wanna get the grommet started on the peg. Then go and line your donut gasket side up. and slide it on. All right, when you get your stinger, you're going to want to install both of the gaskets, one on each side, and go ahead and install that into the pipe. Next up, you're going to take your stock mount from your stock can, pull that up through the Bikeman can, and set this in place. And line up your stinger, line that up, and go ahead and lightly start the bolt on the can. Now you're going to take the stock springs, start installing springs. And go around the Y pipe to the main pipe with all the springs. And we repeat the steps for the last spring on the pipe. Next we'll go to the pipe to the can. I will go ahead and pull these on. This, by the way, is the Bikeman Handy Dandy Spring Puller. Find them online as well. Really nice. All right, and there's how you pull the springs on. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install the pipe sensor. This is a 17. And you don't have to kill it. And also we will be installing the sensor in the can. All right, we'll be removing the anti-rotation. This keeps the stock sensor from spinning in here. We do not need that. So we'll go ahead and install it. These are 17 mil. And then just go ahead and kind of aim this upward and go ahead and snug this up. All right, and don't forget to tighten up the can. All right, when you reinstall your belt, notice the rotation arrows. Make sure you put it in the proper direction. You want to take your T25 and just get this snug, not tight, because we're going to be spinning this. But being this is threaded, you don't want it to pop off because we're going to be applying pressure to the helix. I've already tightened that up. I'm just going to double check. It's not tight, like I said, it's just snug. And that's just going to stop it from expanding and popping back off. We're going to go ahead and run the stock tool back in. All right, that looks like it's wide enough. We'll go ahead and walk the belt on. The belt to position, walk it around the secondary. Now you can go ahead and loosen the stock tool back up. Walk the belt out. Kind of gets pinched in here. All right, now that we've got the belt walked all the way out, now we check for deflection on here. We'll loosen this back up a tiny bit so it's spinnable. And again, this is opposite thread. You want to run that in until you have the proper belt deflection. That feels pretty good right there. We'll go ahead and tighten this back up. Again, this is just a little bolt. Don't kill it. Just snug it up. All right, and that's the complete install for the Stage 1 Bikeman Bolt-On Performer Kit for the 850 Summit.
All right, guys, so there it is. The 850 E-Tech Summit. It's got the Stage 1 Bikeman Performer Kit on it. Showed you how to get it in there. If you want to get those or any of our other parts, go check out bikemanperformance.com. Till next time, we're out.